The president's COVID-19 diagnosis comes as his administration and Senate Republicans are pressing ahead to seat Judge Amy Coney Barrett on the U.S. Supreme Court, a move that could reshape our bedrock laws for decades. We saw this scene last weekend, a Rose Garden gathering to announce Judge Barrett's nomination with very little social distancing and very few masks. Now, at least 4 attendees are COVID-19 positive, and Judge Barrett herself reportedly tested positive over the summer, but has subsequently recovered. To help us unpack just how these COVID cases could impact the Supreme Court confirmation process, we bring in Kate Shaw, constitutional law professor at Cardozo Law School and ABC News contributor. Thanks so much for joining us, Kate.
Good to be with you, Lindsay.
So some have called for Judge Barrett to quarantine since she was potentially exposed to the virus within the last week. Is that an option if she wants to stay in the running? And for which proceedings, if any, does she need to show up for in person?
Well, so she's right now in the process of doing these one-on-one meetings with various members of the Senate. And in theory, they could decide to forego that part of the process. There's nothing that requires a nominee to have these individual meetings, although it has very much been the tradition for such nominees. So that I think she could forego. The actual confirmation hearing, I think it's very difficult to see suspending. It could be possible to hold that hearing potentially remotely. Of course, it's never been done, but in theory, at least, particularly if you have members of the Judiciary Committee like Mike Lee, who is on that committee and who has tested positive, unable to participate in person, you could imagine a hearing in which some or potentially all participants are remote rather than present in the same room.
So just to really get specific with that, if a number of senators need to isolate or quarantine in the days and weeks ahead, a confirmation process would be able to be done entirely remotely?
Well, no. So the hearing itself could be remote. What couldn't happen remotely, at least without a Senate rule change, is the confirmation itself. So you remember back in May, the House of Representatives changed its rules so that its members could vote remotely, anticipating, just this sort of possibility that a number of members could potentially become unable to show up in person, as has traditionally been done, in order to cast their vote. So the House changed its rules to allow remote voting, but the Senate hasn't done that. And in fact, Mitch McConnell has steadfastly insisted that there are constitutional problems with allowing members to vote remotely. And so the Senate has not changed its rules. So you could have the meetings could happen via Zoom. The hearing itself potentially could. But unless the Senate changes its rules, she cannot be confirmed unless she is able to be confirmed in person by the full Senate.
And speaking of the Constitution, while the president and First Lady isolate and recover, for now it would seem that the president's reelection campaign is on hold. Would it even be possible to postpone the November 3rd election?
In a word, no. So the date of the election is set by statute, and so both houses of Congress would have to pass a statute changing the date of the election. The president has no unilateral authority whatsoever in this sphere. And even if you could imagine a world in which the House and the Senate did decide to postpone the election, which I think is exceedingly unlikely, under the Constitution, the president's term ends on January 20th. So that's at noon on January 20th. He is finished being president unless he has been reelected before then. So even if there was some desire to postpone the election by a couple of weeks, and even if there were some world in which that were politically feasible, the amount of time between November 3rd and January 20th is relatively short. So I honestly don't see a world in which any proposal to postpone the election has any real chance of going anywhere.
Very helpful. Thank you so much for breaking the Constitution down for us, Kate Shaw. Have a good one.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.